Crazeless. But for that particular space for classified names. So let's go to household. And then you see, okay, well, I did this in this 7.9. So I captured in 7.9. So you see people just kind of list their own things up there. And then you notice, hey, how come there are these like little funny looking figures? Well, people want to kind of like, they want to show up, like be more like, I don't know, more attractive to people, right? So they look different, so people would click on it. So in a way, it's kind of like a way to attract people to click on the thing. So what if you kind of like go through one of these things? Okay, so it looks like this is someone who actually trying to post the services online. And in fact, I think in the old days, it may be less of this, but now that people doing more of this, and you can see there are a lot more pictures. So it's not very boring as before, like way back when. So this is like 7/9, 2021. And I guess you can kind of hover through different pictures and see what it is. So that's going to give you a little bit assurance that this is a legit business. Or, and then it kind of give you a little bit more of what's going on. And then the map thing is kind of like a new addition that creates this into it. Before it's got nothing to text. So now let's look at another one, gigs. So basically you can try to like make a little bit of money, you got some extra time. So you can see that this guy, okay, oh, deliver DoorDash. So this is a startup DoorDash that actually trying to recruit people delivering for them. So in a way, they're using Craigslist for it. So I don't know if they actually pay for it. So we can start basically entice people. It's kind of like Deliveroo or Food Panda, that kind of thing. So let's go back to Craigslist history. So it's a kind of interesting thing because Craig is kind of like a self-professed introvert. So he actually just recently moved to San Francisco and he wanted to find like his own community. So he goes to different meetings, meetups, and then he actually created, he wanted to share his events with his friends. So he started as a mailing list. So he just said like the events in the area, the tech events in the area to his friends, mailing lists. But then people kept responding to him, asking for different things. So I think one of the things that people were saying was job listing, like there's like a job opening at this company, can you just share it with like everybody? So we started to do this, and then there more and more requests come in. So he decided, okay, you know what, maybe just put everything up like as a internet web page for people to post their stuff. So it was spread by word of mouth, and that was back in 1995. And there's no marketing, there's no advertising. It just spread just by virtue of just people trusting the guy in the area, San Francisco. So anyway, so the one on the left is Craig, and then the taller guy actually is the CEO. He was hired when I guess Craig doesn't want to keep doing his development anymore. So they've been together ever since. And you know, when Craigslist was launched, I mean, none of these things existed. There was no, I mean, there was BlackBerry wasn't even out. I don't know if you guys even remember the BlackBerry, but there was definitely no iPhone. There was none of these UX, UI design. I mean, forget about AI. There was probably AI winter back then, right? Blockchains, no one even know what cryptography is from just a little bit of like nerd community. And then let's go back a little bit, right? At that time, how these web pages looked. Well, Google looked like that before they kind of updated it. They made it more minimalistic. They changed the font. And then you remember, like the hyperlinks, you have the underline there. And then look at something like from Hong Kong, right? So this is the South China Morning Post. I mean, look at that. They just love all those graphics way back when. So now the UX came in, right? So it's like cleaner, it's more purposeful, it's not very distracting. And this is Cathay Pacific. I mean, look at that. I mean, like nowadays the UX guy knows that, hey, you know what? Let's just let people book right away on the main page before you have to click through. So this is what Craigslist looked like in 1999. So it hasn't really changed much, right? Other than they definitely adopted like HTML5 and CSS, right? So you don't have those underlined things anymore. The typeface is a lot cleaner. It's more modern looking, but still very, very sort of boring probably for the Gen Z and millennials. So what's the big deal, right? You said, well, the thing is that it actually attracts a lot of traffic, right? So I mean, look at that. I mean, it's bringing 300 and like close to 330 million monthly visits. Okay, it has dropped a bit more actually recently to maybe like in the mid 200s. And if you go to similar web, I guess this is where you can kind of find page like rankings of different web pages. Globally, it's ranked in within the top 100, which is pretty good, right? And then for a country, it's 20 in the United States, and for its own category, it's ranked number 1 classified, right? So this is just another view of what it is. This is by search traffic. It's actually pretty high up. So and it's also known as the most profitable classified website in the world. So 7 to 8% profitable. Okay, so that means each dollar it actually keeps 80% in its pocket. And it only hires 30 to 50 employees. Like that's amazing. So pretty much like I think Craig wants it to go like that because he wants to have like a very meaningful relationship with all the employees so he knows everybody. Now, so let's look at this revenue, right? This is the serious stuff. Okay? Now, the company is private, so you don't really get to see its financial statements. But all the companies are very interested in how much money they're making. So in 2018, it was estimated that they make about $1 billion. $1 billion. Of course, Craig said that it doesn't really make that much. Now, but there seems to be a problem recently. Since 2018, it started to drop. I mean, it dropped a whooping, like 20, I don't know, 28 million. That's a lot of money. Right? And then it continued to drop in 2020, and in 2021 it popped up a little bit, mostly because I think the US the job posting, and that's another category that was driving the revenue. So what are the trends in crisis? Let's see like what the competitors are doing. Right? So okay, this is honestly a clone. A really it's just a clone of bracelets. It's like there's nothing special. Right? So let's see what it does. Also go to New York City. And then let's look at caregivers babysitting, and then obviously people use it. Right? I mean, I don't know if it's making money, but people post this stuff on it. So I guess if you have a platform and you are a business, you probably want to post as much your stuff as possible, get as much exposure as possible to increase your business, right? So maybe. So this is a Hong Kong classified. I mean, notice that they actually, compared to the other one, which is it has no advertising, this one is just full of it. It's all over the place. Oh my God, I actually use it. So I actually learned to ignore all that stuff, but it's really annoying. Every time I use it, it really gets to me because sometimes it pops up in advertising. I just hate it. If there's an alternative and people actually put their stuff on, I will go there. The problem is the crisis in Hong Kong is really I don't know what happened. There's just not a lot of posting in Hong Kong for crisis. So this is another page. You kind of go down a little bit, you see like all the listings and the taxonomy. So someone has to like organize the stuff according to the categories. So this is another one. This is startup carousel, right? And you guys have been seeing it. And so it looks like they take a different approach, right? Other than similar, right? They're using advertising. They come tell you, hey, we have an ad, right? So I think this is more kind of like attractive probably to the Gen Z millennials. And then they use the icons down there, I think, which is interesting. It's not as tiring as reading tons and tons of words. But if you drill down a little more, it's kind of like similar, right? They show you all this stuff. But then they sort of have an innovation there. I want to keep calling it innovation. You see that how like they have that price drop? So instead of nudge, that's actually cause people to click on that. Say, hey, you know what? It's a drop from 70 to 60. Maybe I should, right? So I don't know. I mean, if you are a product manager or a data analyst, then maybe you find out if that's actually work. So let's kind of get back a little bit after seeing the competitors or people are trying to do what Craigslist does. So its vision is trustworthy, efficient, relatively non-commercial place where people find all the basics in the local area, right? So before actually the Craigslist main page, if you look at the top, it actually says New York City, right? So I think one of the key things is that it actually localized like all the offerings of the classified in that area. So kind of mirror what you actually do in real life. But I think so. I went to some web pages classified, and you don't really know where it is. It could be like India. You don't really know. So I think in that respect, I think Craigslist is the right direction. But I think some of the newer companies who are trying to do what Craigslist does is that they are targeting, maybe it's their Achilles heel, the trustworthy part. I think that is the biggest problem with Craigslist, because there seems to be a lot of problems with Craigslist. Sometimes people get cheated, there are scams, they're pretending, they're phishing scams, and then sometimes just people get cheated out of apartments and say, oh yeah, this is for rent, but it's not really for rent. And also efficiency. You can see what other companies try to target efficiency too. So how do you become more efficient, right? So this is another startup in the US. So instead of being very broad, they kind of narrow it down to this one little thing, right? So this is just for basically just kind of like a handyman or handyman services. So they try to increase the credibility by basically saying, oh, yeah, look at these companies that are supporting us, right? And they have really nice graphics that people like. And then let's go into see what they do, right? So, I mean, it's actually very clean, very enticing. Right? So they kind of add credibility to this thing, and I'm sure they have massive. Right? Yeah, they're using icons to kind of make it faster for people to react, right? Now, could Facebook actually come with something called Facebook Marketplace? I mean, could this be a Craigslist killer? I don't know, right? But it does have huge advantages. And in fact, since Facebook Marketplace have been launched, Craigslist revenue has been dropping. In fact, anecdotally, I've been talking to people, and they say, oh yeah, I used to use Craigslist, but I don't even go on Craigslist, I just do Facebook. Because they're so used to the interaction of Facebook, the community is very thoughtful US, and they actually try to make it easy when you post something. So I think that one of the things they do, they're using AI, and they take a picture of the bicycle, and it would object identify, like object detection, it would tell, well, that's a bicycle. So you don't even have to look up the category. So it actually makes the user journey much better. So you can see that people on Facebook actually are very thoughtful about designing something that people will use. Because I think they launched it probably a few years before, and I think not much fanfare, I think not a lot of people use it. But then the second time around, they actually made it a lot better. Okay, so this is another company you may not have heard of. It's called Cantonese. So its strategy is that it's actually buying tons and tons of classified kind of companies around the world. So it's not competing locally. Well, it is competing locally, but everywhere. So it's not having like a giant thing like Facebook, right? So it's buying up all these little things. I don't know how they're going to manage this thing. Because I have used Gumtree before. I didn't even know that this company owns it, but it's very aggressive in buying up.
I used to work for this company.
Oh, you used to work for this company? We can talk to her later.
I think that actually it's not the biggest. the right person is eBay Cloud Provider. And 2021,
They bought.
Eden bought eBay Cloud Provider. So you can see that the first one, the second mobile, eBay, marketplace, a lot of them actually is under eBay. It did out of them. Junkie is out of under eBay. And then after the acquisition, actually before the acquisition, because of, I don't know whether which country you do this. Country you take them
I didn't Singapore.
Okay. Oh, the PIC.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know you.
What a small world.
Okay. So basically, Gumtree is no longer belongs to Gumtree UK is no longer belongs to the vendor. But then Gumtree Singapore is going to shut down. Gumtree Australia we sold. Kind of they buy it from eBay, and then they're going to sell the donation on European market. So right now they're actually the legacy. Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't even know this existed when I was doing research for it. I'm like, whoa, what's going on here?
So the headquarters is actually the mother company is in Norway.
Yes, Oslo.
Yeah, in Norway. And the eBay headquarters is actually in Amsterdam. Yeah, it's European.
Oh, I should talk to you because they don't need to stay.
They fine. I
Their
mean,
company
they sold it. They sold it and it dismissed they shut down the tap. Now you stop.
Okay, we'll find out more from her, right? So, okay, so anyway, this is kind of like another ginormous company. Okay, so basically what I want to say is that this company is, Craigslist, basically it's come down to death by 1,000 cuts. Okay, so, in a way, Craigslist have proven a business model that people who actually want to connect with others through some kind of platform. And you can see like everyone, basically, this is like a feeding frenzy. Everyone is trying to take a piece of the action, right? So you have here the jobs, right? The Indeed, Jobs TV, and all those things. And then that's housing, rental market, real estate sales. And this is kind of like the traditional classified AOS, right? eBay, that kind of stuff. And then there's the gigs. It's just all over the place. So people are just kind of taking pieces out of places. And surprisingly, it's still pulling in like $600 million. So let's say you are the new product manager for Craigslist, and you see that your revenue has been dropping, right? And you need to convince Craig, right, and the CEO that we need to do something, or we're going to, see the revenue continue sliding, right? So what should you do? Like, to make it simpler to use, maybe even more low environment. People should love Craigslist in the US, something, right? And some of them actually hate it for some of the trust issues. They kind of get burned before, they probably say, oh, that makes Craigslist again. So we're not going to do that now. There's no time. I'm wrapping up. So next time, so I'm kind of hoping that this is going to kick off maybe a series of short kind of like group workshop where you can pretend to be product managers. And for those of you who are product managers and have a lot of experience, you can share your views on what you would do. So it's kind of like just playing like a scenario. Because I think some product managers should be doing a lot of product management. I mean, not product management, project management rather than product management. Right, so they're going to exercise their product management muscles or empathy with the customers. So this could be a way for us to kind of play along, right? Like in our next number of series. So I'm going to try to maybe next time, I'm going to try to examine the problem a little bit and what kind of solution we can get to. And then a few more, we're going to try to come up with solutions. How are we going to get the resources and how are we going to build this thing together? Okay. So right now it's very well.
Actually, you guys can think about it overnight, and if you have any thoughts, suggestions, or answers to these questions, feel free to discuss in the meetup discussion.
Yeah, I mean, it could be like a month long, 2 months long. It doesn't have to be overnight. Right? Because sometimes ideas come like your least most expected.
Or share with us in the next meetup.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, write it down and then we'll discuss it. and we'll play some games together.
I
Okay.
can tell actually that is a question for you.
Pardon?
I can tell these are the questions you always have to answer.
Okay,
Because when I work on that.
I see.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now I'll pass the floor to who's the next speaker? Is that
Brian.
Brian? Okay, so Brian, you're up.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian, product manager for Bowtie. Just some brief intro of myself. I joined Bowtie 3 years ago as an APM, associate product manager. Before I worked in Hong Kong as a lawyer, so it's a big transition for me because I find product management is much more interesting than legal work. So today I would like to share with you how to be product management in Bowtie briefly. And how do we deliver product delights in a regulated environment? So people will always ask, hey, Brian, when you're working in Bowtie, do you have a lot of legal issues that you need to deal with? I say, of course. Like basically every week I have meetings with compliance people. So that's part of my job to explain to compliance managers and our in-house legals about what are we trying to deliver in our products and what are the risks. So that's part of my thing, I guess. But I guess like I would try to share with you like some of the tips that we kind of encapsulate after running like 2 years of product management for the whole time. So yeah, so let's get started. Yeah, so the agenda is basically I will run through with you like how we product management in Bowtie and caps in a really short format. And there's a problem that we face, and I will share with you the tips that we find quite helpful in delivering product in Bowtie. Okay. So before, when we are still in 30 people size, we do product management in a really ad hoc way. So we don't have product manager by then. The CEO himself is a product manager. And basically, everything is discussed within the same meeting room. And every issue can be discussed with a tap on the shoulder. But while we are growing in size and in scale, we find this process not being sustainable. So we look into the internet and see how other companies do product management. And somehow we come across this book. It's called Shape Up, and it's written by a company called Basecamp in the States. And basically, they advocate product management methodology for shaping value. So in this process, basically, in the shaping stage, the company will spend time to gather insights from different parties. Product managers will write product brief, product requirement documents, and they try to kind of shape up the details that they're trying to be within the development cycle. And after we got all these ideas, we gather them into kind of like a document, single document. And we go through a process called vetting. In the vetting process, basically product leaders, engineering leaders, and design leaders will sit together, and we will choose based on our OKRs, our product strategy, and company strategy to see which product or which opportunity or bet we want to make in this coming development cycle. And the last one is viewing, of course, the viewing process involving designers and engineers and product managers. So if you have time, feel free to read this book. It's free online. So just now I mentioned like we build in cycles. So our development cycle was spread into around like 6 weeks. So after we make bet on what we are trying to build, we will go into the so-called 6-week cycle. And within the 6-week cycle, small team involving designer, engineer, and product manager, they will start their work with a small team. They will do small weekly planning meetings, mini retros, and they kind of fill in the details or the specs that they need within the cycle, and they try to build as much as possible within the sprint. And afterwards, after this 6-week sprint, we have a 2-week cooling off period, and that's where we do our retrospective UAT and rolling out features to the customers. So that's how we work in both. But somehow we still find some inefficiency, especially when we are delivering instrument products. So let's say when we are delivering our first term live products, the product requirements are usually generated from the actuarial team first. Then, based on their requirement, we will kind of start to design the software requirements, make the graphic design, and kind of shape it into the bets that we try to make, and we put it into the so-called cycle and we implement it. And we try to do the stuff as we just now shared. But the problem is when we try to roll this 6-week cycle methodology, we are not involving other teams. So other teams are kind of running in a different designations. So I remember like around 2 years ago when we started, we come across a lot of issues, especially when we try to loop in our compliance managers and legal team and operation team only at the verification stage. So somehow big concerns are missed, and when they do the UAT, they say, "Hey, what's going on? Oh, it shouldn't be like that. It's illegal or blah blah blah. It's against the thing, the rules that are there, and we'll be in deep trouble." So it's all over back to the requirement stage again, and we put it back into another cycle, and this kind of inefficiency happens. And what's more is within the team, we always say is compliance developer. So we have this symptoms within the team. People may say like, hey, we can't really deliver within the cycle or within this sprint because compliance is still reviewing our contents or stuff. We need more time. So PMs or engineers and designers will simply wait until compliance team or legal team give their reviews, and it creates extra redundancy because everyone is waiting each other, and yeah, that wastes a lot of time. And there are some bosses within the team also saying that, hey, how about let's skip compliance this time? I think we can simply do it without letting them know, because simply a change on simple wordings, right? And it shouldn't be risky. And the first symptom we observe is sometimes when you try to change things, when we try to propose changes to what's been there for a while, the compliance team or operation team will say something like, "Hey, that's the way we do things before, and let's not change it. The status quo is better." So we find this kind of symptoms, and it's definitely not helpful, for us to bring product innovation and delight experience to our customers. And so we, throughout our different sprints, we try to consolidate our learnings, and we come across different discussions with our other team members, and we try to encapsulate our techniques within this 3 simple groups. The first one is no dialogue. which is we require team members to understand more about the legal or the compliance requirement. The second one is we expect PM to make good question and not being an yes man. We simply don't expect PM to do everything in compliance team or legal team has to do. And the third one is we try to do more communication with the other teams in a more effective manner. Instead of emails or Slack, there are a lot of different tools that we try to leverage on to make communication more effective. So I will try to explain these techniques in kind of more detailed way to let anyone know how we try to improve our process. So the first one, no dialogue. The objective is to try to understand the constraints and because PMs need to play with the law. We're not asking you to be the lawyer in the team because it's impossible to know everything. I definitely don't agree with jumping in the shoes of other team members because that will kind of break trust. But I guess as PMs, I think it's quite basic for PMs to understand what are the constraints in the industry. For example, if we are doing digital product, one common law that we come across is the personal data privacy ordinance. Because when we do personal information collection, we need to comply with that law. And I think PMs and Hong Kong should understand what are the constraints there. Whether we can do marketing through emails that we can collect. I think PMs should know have a basic understanding. And of course, depends on the company context. PMs should also understand the domain restrictions. For example, in Bowtie, we are an insurance company, so we are governed by the insurance ordinance. And so we do trainings regularly to understand what are the restrictions, new restrictions or new guidelines issued by the insurance authority. We try to understand more because it helps us to understand what are the constraints that we are working with. And if you're working in fintech or let's say virtual bank, of course you need to know banking models. I think that's the basic requirement for PM. So domain knowledge, which PM should have, will definitely include the law that governs the product that you're working on. And we try to put this understanding into writings. So not only PMs, but we need to let our team members, designers, and engineers know what are the restrictions. So when we try to draft our product requirement document, we dedicate a session for legal and compliance blockers that are present in the opportunity or the project that we are working on. So this is a template that we use in Bowtie. So you can see this is the pitch that we usually write before we make betting in our development cycle, and we have different sessions and some guidance questions to prompt people to write and think more deeply. And in the last session, the training officers we explicitly point out that PMs or engineers or designers, when they write this kind of stuff, they need to think about the legal and external risks that we may have in developing this project. And I think writing it out helps the team to understand what are the constraints, and we want to avoid situations where the team only knows the constraints very late in the development cycle, and that is harmful to the speed of the team. And the other reason we try to put it out first is because when we write it out, what are the blockers, and before we start building, we will try to unlock some of the blockers even before we start. For example, we know that we are building a new feature that may collect personal information. I think it's good to look in our compliance team and legal team earlier before we even build it, so that they may have context of it before we launch the project. So and it helps every team to understand what's the progress and help the team to keep the rhythm and move on. So that's the first tactic we try to have with is no dialogue. So the second one is about asking good questions. And before going into this, I try to I try to give you an understanding about how legal and compliance may think in their heads. This is a quote from a book I recently read. It's called Beep. It's by Tony Fadell. He's the first PM of iPhone and iPod. And I think it's definitely a very good read for PM. Definitely recommend everyone here to read it. He simply, in a chapter that dedicated about legal team, he simply says, always remember that lawyers live in a black and white world, legal versus illegal. And the job of lawyer is to tell you simply what are the laws and explain the risks. But the job of PM is to make the decision. So I think as PM, you need to understand legal and compliance team are simply working in a really risk-averse environment, and their starting point is they are starting from a government viewpoint and a viewpoint where they try not to piss off customers, and that's where the divergence happens. And I guess the key concern is that the key concern is not customers. Their key concern is risk, and that's why usually why we argue with compliance and legal is because our key concern is that. So I think this is a really important starting point that we need to know. And based on it, I guess the job of PM is to remember that PM should be the person to balance the interests of all parties. And we should avoid a situation where compliance or legal tells you, hey, why not add a disclaimer there? Let's add a checkbox there. This is not balance. This is called instructions, and we try to avoid that kind of situations. So your job as PM is to ask questions to legal and compliance. And some questions that I guess you can try to ask is, for example, I understand your concern, but what are the blockers here within this project, and what are the risks and legal concerns here? Can we instead do blah blah blah? And I guess these questions are kind of constructive to putting the discussions forward instead of living in a black and white situation. So I think this also builds on the tactic that we had the first one, no dialogue. If you know the law or rule in a basic manner, you can make better questions to the team members because you're not asking something out of the blue, and I think that really helps. And the role of PM is to understand that there are always a lot of constraints within the company, and the key is not to break everything at once, but try to incrementally push the boundary as you can gradually. And we need to understand that PM doesn't lead. We are not leaders. We are not team leaders. We can't give instructions to different team members. We simply can convince them by data, by customer insights, by our understanding of the problems. So one thing is compliance and legal teams are important stakeholders. Try to convince them they're not your adversaries. So try to avoid the black and white concept. If they don't agree with our suggestion, they're not our team members. Try to avoid this kind of thinking. Try to consider them as team members. As I said, they are just starting from different perspectives, and if you understand that, then it will kind of help you to bring forward the constructive conversation that are required. And also, I think a good legal and compliance team will try to understand the product's point of use, which is the user point of use. And in a lot of time, basically the legal requirements are not black and white. and there are a lot of gray areas. And I guess it's only through discussions and collaborations you can find innovative and creative way to get into the gray areas. And I'm not advising everyone to break the law, but try to be creative and work around the law and make sure that the things that you deliver can bring delight to customers and also comply with the law. Okay. Lastly, I think this is quite important, but foundation. I would say foundation for our PM. Communication is an important task for PM. But I guess if you are communicating with compliance, operation, or legal team, you need to understand that they have a lot of documents and words to read. And I think giving them more words to read is not really constructive. So we try to leverage a lot of different tools online. For example, whenever we're bringing a new product, before UAT or building anything, we try to list out all the key steps for customers in a flow chart with some categories so that they can understand what customers may go through and they can pinpoint the risky areas in the flow chart before we move. And also we use a lot of Miro and Notion to do this kind of collaboration. So compliance and legal team can also go into the documents or flow chart to make comments before any discussions or meetings. And I guess meetings is also an indispensable aspect of PM job, and every PM has a lot of meetings every day. But I guess try to make meetings more constructive by setting up meetings selectively, and only set up meetings with compliance and legal team members who are closing down divergences that can be solved within the flow charts or documents. And I guess we all need to be well prepared for a meeting. So this is a sample agenda that we try to set. We try to list out what are the goals of the meetings and what are the agenda, and we include the periods, for example, like the PRT that I showed before, or the flow charts. So we try to make every team members more involved before the meetings. Okay, so I guess that's all, and these are some of the tiny tactics that we try to employ in both sides to make our collaborations with legal and compliance more constructive and more effective. So I guess that's all, and I guess I will reserve the Q&A in the later sessions. And one last thing is we are recruiting. So if you're interested to join our product team or other teams, even if you are a talented cafe ambassador, you can click this link and make an application. And yeah, that's all. Yeah.
So next.
Just want to make sure everyone can see me clearly. Yeah, a little bit of my background. So I have been from about 10 years of product management experience. So I was in Hong Kong in the B2B business, fashion supply chain. And then I moved to Shanghai in 2018 to work at B2C and Booking.com for localization, Booking.com app for localization. Then I switched to eBay, started by what we always mentioned about from 2019, and then eBay sold to Finland. But actually, I can say in the past 2 years, I worked for the marketplace, which is actually focusing on the emerging market, that is South Africa, Singapore, Mexico. So I'm not familiar with the Hong Kong market because I've been here for a couple of years, but I think the product is really the same. Okay, know your customer. This is not talk about knowing your customer persona. know a customer actually is introduced from the finance industry, actually related to government. When you open a bank account, you must be familiar with this process. The banks ask you to provide an ID, to fill in a list of long list of forms, basically for you most likely to collect your address history, bank history or transaction history, and your ID. So they actually have 4 elements. They have an acceptance policy, identification procedure, that is you have to submit an ID, make sure you are who you are. The goal of that is actually for money laundering, to prevent money laundering. It is not for your benefit as a customer. It is for the bank or the government benefit. They want to monitor it and make sure it's a risk management. You're not going to monitor money laundering. And why we talk about know your customer? Because our focus today will be about the second step, identification procedure. KYC is not a new term. KYC, we don't know that because you are familiar with why we have to do that. If you're Hong Kong local, you know the sanction list right now. Our government official is also in the sanction list. You know about the money laundering. You know about the US taxpayer. If you are open a bank account, they will ask you if you're a taxpayer, right? Why do you need to know that? Because all about this kind of identity will put them into trouble if you open a bank account. I can share experience. My husband is an American. Then when we wanted to open a bank account, maybe he's American and also in the Hong Kong people. When you wanted to open a bank account for buying the stock, the bank advised you not to open it because they don't want to handle all the taxation. In US, once you make profit in the stock market, they have to do tax. They have to pay that. And that means the banks will introduce more, they get more proceeds. And that's why know your customer is so important. For the bank industry, they want to know you more because they want to avoid the risk on the travel. And but that when we put it here, but when we move from KYC to eKYC, then we are not talking about the benefit of the company. We're also talking about the benefit of the customer. What does E mean? Electronic. And once we do electronics, that means actually digitalization. Well, because today we say we only focus on the ID verification. So electronic means now you don't have to sit in front of the counter to submit your photo and submit your ID to tell people who you are. Now you can do it only electronically. When we say electronically, it includes 3 elements. 1, an identity document. In Hong Kong, it's very common, it's your ID. In America, you can talk about a driver license. The second part, an ID means there must be a number that connect you with the government, who you are. Second part, your selfie. Third part is the matching process. What they're matching is the ID in your ID document. They basically capture, it's very simple, OPR capture the number. They connect this one with the government database and retrieve the photo to see whether it is Josie. And the selfie is representing you are Josie. So basically, all this process time is to prove you are. It's to prove you are. You tell people who you are. You are accepted who you are. Sorry, confused this word. So that's why once this KYC become common, it can be commercialized in a lot of internet industry. One of the very common place that is being used is the e-commerce and marketplace. That is also one of the answers to your question, Leo. How to increase the trust in credit as well. Because in the marketplace is a bit different from e-commerce. E-commerce focuses on B2C, business seller to individual seller. So business seller can ask them for business registration to sign up and prove their identity. But for marketplace, most of them actually are C2C. C2C means individual to individual, just like you actually sell your second-hand iPhone in Carousel. Or they even have a small business. For example, I have a small store. This doesn't mean I have a VR. So there is a lot of scam happening. I told you, I want to sell this iPhone. I got your money, but I don't have stock. I don't have the iPhone. There is something called scam. Now this is one of the projects I've been doing in the past year. I am the PO. One of the products I do is actually South Africa. South Africa has high unemployment rate, which means they have a high high percentage scam. That's one of the biggest projects we wanted to do in order to increase the trust on the platform for C2C transaction, or C2C actually this kind of bill is to introduce actually ID verification to the individual seller. In Chinese, it's not common, called something exactly. And if you are familiar with the app in China, you know that almost every app you have to do this. So actually, what is the value of that? First of all, we get seller as a verified seller. Then that kind of indicate that the thing itself is kind of going to verify listing. This is actually the individual item proposed on the marketplace. And then somehow we need to say that we have to bring a value that, oh, user looks like the buyer is being protected. That is the something we call it commercial value. But as a PM, you need to propose when you introduce a feature, you introduce the product to your customer. You have to propose something, and you have proposed the value. You call it the business value proposition. What is the value you can propose? Now we come to a legal issue. Just like what Brian said, we always have to fight with the legal. Okay, I want to say, yeah, time doesn't mean really the physical, but then we always have to make a balance between them. Okay, we can say you want to protect the buyer from scam. Legal say, how can we identify which one is scam? You cannot, you just get the ID information, right? Even though I know that it's actually a Brian, I cannot prove or verify whether Brian is actually a scammer or not. Okay, I say we basically enable them to be a trust seller. How can I know that Brian is a trustworthy seller? I just know his personal information. I cannot. Okay, we can say we know who is selling you because when we know it's Brian, there's a question. If a platform, let's say Carousel, tell you, I know the individual seller, I know their identity. If you were a seller, would you like to join them? I just want to sell my second-hand iPhone. But then Carousel is telling me they know who I am. I don't know how much they know about me. That is the concern. The only thing we can actually bring the value is we can report the seller when a crime is committed. That is something we can do with a verified seller program. So that's why when we do as a PM, when we do value proposition, we have especially when those kind of things is kind of like touching the law. We have to be very clear. We as a PM have to be very clear and precise on what is the value we bring to them. Because as a PM, just like what Brian said, we work with multiple departments. We work with the CS, we work with all the developers, not like radio contractors and internal people. But we work with the people to help you to promote the value of the product, like PR, marketing, and CS. How they help you to promote the product is actually getting the idea, get the idea from you as a PM. That's why we have to be very clear about this. Now we come to that's why we say actually the legal issue we mentioned about the legal department always challenge us. And now next the question is, ID verification, one of the elements we say ID verification is once they capture your ID number, they can retrieve your photo or personal information from the government database. Do you think any company can do that? Even though you can say, okay, you create a startup company, I want to do that. Do you think you have the ability, not the technology ability? I'm talking about you can persuade the government to allow you to access the information by submitting your individual ID to them. It's not okay because submit to your company license. And then as a marketplace, most likely you don't have that license to retrieve that information because they're sensitive. And one thing to share is when they can get your information, this is not just a photo, they can get a lot of your personal information. But it's a matter of the law of control how much they can share with the third party and what they can do. That's why in this kind of project, most likely we partner with the licensing company. They are this kind of identity management company. Now we come to another project. So the project is not something that your company can all develop by yourself. It has to be a partnership project. That means you work together with a third party to develop the product that fits to your business environment. So you can see from this graph, the left-hand side is what you can do as a PM of the marketplace, which is just a very small part. It's the entry point and exit point. Entry point is business value proposition, how you bring the traffic, how you bring the user to start the process. basic point is you get the verification result and how to display the value. Yeah. But the core of the entire ID verification process happens in the verification part. Before I go to the next slide, do you think, as a PM, what kind of challenge you think you would face if you would like to do some integration projects? Sorry, a big piece on the right hand side, a small piece on the left hand side. And then remember, this is the ID verification. The core is actually at the right hand side, which is out of your hand. You cannot control it. You can only control what they give it to you and what you pass it to them. So one is actually a lot of the core element is out of your control. That is already a very difficult challenge. Good question. Okay. Before you select the partner, because the current process is first you have to select a partner. There is more than one partner or kind of party to do that. The challenge is how can you test it or test their accuracy? Okay, you can only test it by asking the internal team to do it. For example, you ask the entire product team, asking the entire developers using Apple PR or whatever to do that. Now we come to another question. How do they do that? They have to carry all the process. We need to replicate the entire process, and then we get the result of the partner and tell them. This is another legal issue as well. First of all, you got to secure the legal. Second, how to protect it. Even though they're internal staff, they're willing to do that. How to protect the information. How to re-verify the information. How to verify the accuracy. And the fourth one, we need to not just testing the accuracy, also testing the process smoothness. How do you want to test it? You can run out. In certain steps, I fail. In certain steps, I cannot do it. How can they describe it? Basically, what we did is actually we asked the volunteers, members, internal members. We want them to actually, we remember clearly, we need them to do a recording. We need them to submit the information. So basically, in case they tell us there's a problem, we need to read the recording. Basically, we may have access to the personal information about it. This kind of thing we need to align and then how to protect them. This kind of recording safely. Plus, I can also mention one thing that is actually in the emerging market in South Africa. People are not concerned too much about privacy as people in Hong Kong. So the internal staff are very willing to do that. But I'm not so sure, but if you're in Hong Kong, you want to increase your internal members, I'm not so sure how many people are actually willing to do that. This is also a thing that we need to consider when introducing a kind of sensitive feature or product. Understand the market people's behaviors. Because in the American market, what they concern about is scam rather than privacy. The priority is that they worry about more about scam or money being cheated rather than my ID information. But in Hong Kong, because of the more even though not just Hong Kong, in Europe, with multiple countries, people concerned about privacy rather than being scammed because they're well protected. That's why this is one of the challenges that Manny mentioned about. The second part is all the black box environment that you cannot control them. You cannot control them in a way that the challenge is about gathering the metrics. The conversion funnel metrics I mentioned about it. The third one is how to communicate with each other. In each account, like we also mentioned, what we mentioned about, let's say, like kind is defined maybe like mobile number, email, user ID. We cannot share this kind of information because when you work with third party, one of the concerns, what are the information you can share with the third party, and what are the information they can share with us. We have we identify individual as let's say email, mobile number, user ID. They as a verification partner, they will identify the party as the user ID and the ID number. So basically, the user ID and our user ID are different stuff. We cannot communicate. That's fine. Right.
I want to ask you the verification partner, right? You have the government part. I mean, was that even necessary? I mean, can you just collect the ID and then do the selfie and then just skip the government part? I mean, isn't that?
That is the problem with actually then what is the accuracy of it? If you skip the government part, you collect it. Okay, first of all, we still cannot collect the ID because our license doesn't allow us to do that. The second part, even though we can collect the ID, the problem is that because we need to prove that you said who you are. So if I can actually, let's say if it's my ID, but I post many photos on my ID. If I cannot access the government database, I can only worry about the photo on my ID, which is Mandy, and that was my selfie, which is Mandy, but it is actually my ID.
I mean, I don't know how Google does it, because when I signed up for, I guess, a business account some time ago, they asked me to send them a government issued ID.
Yeah.
It's like a photo of it. And that's pretty much it. And then they approved it. I don't know if they actually contacted the.
They don't ask you to do a selfie, right?
That was probably 6 years ago. I don't know if they do that now.
I'm not so sure 6 years ago, because 6 years ago, so it's not really that common at that time. I mean, except in China. But now, even though, because before we select the current the verification partner, we work identity of partner in USA. They also need a selling process. They also can access, even though I use a home password number, they can access my personal info as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, when we look at the conversion funnel, we know a challenge. Just want to make sure everyone is familiar with conversion funnel. Okay. So on the left-hand side, that is what we actually concerned about. On the right-hand side, that is what they can control. They is the verification partner. So on the left-hand side means we concerned about, because this is the entire user journey is we have to attract people to the entry part, so people perform the ID verification and they click on start, and then they finish the process. And then we need to look at the passing rate. How many people pass the verification? Because we don't want people to complete but then they fail. On the right-hand side, we need the verification partner. So the conversion funnel is about whether they can collect the ID. Because when you read the ID number, it can be incorrect. It can be one of the possibilities, one of the risks. The second part is actually when they take a selfie, is it in good quality? Is it actually controlled by the camera, controlled by all the lighting? That one. It is in the government database, whether you have the photo, whether your photo is good quality. And it's not a joke. I can tell you the result actually. That's the biggest last part. Photo. To them is the matching rate. Whether the photo in the government database matches with the real person in the photo. It is what they can control. What we only can have is on the left-hand side. Then the challenge is that one, just like what we say, to us it's per user account. To them it's per ID citizen. When you want to match whether the passing rate, or when they talk about it per person, we talk about it per case. Per case means Josie can take the process 3 times. So if I actually, let's say if I only pass the last time, my passing rate is just 1/3. To that, actually, it's still the same person be having, which is 100%. Basically, we're the same different thing. And then that is also that is, and then the second part is because on the right-hand side is controlled by the black box. Basically, we have little control. And I can share this is the real case where we did it in South Africa. And I cannot share the passing rate, but I can tell you amongst all the failure means they complete the process, but they cannot finish, they cannot be verified. And 30% of the 30% of them who fail because they don't have a photo in their government database. That's why the government asks you to review your ID every couple of years, right? In South Africa, they don't have really unified ID system. Some people have something like a passport, some people have an ID, someone has an ID. One of my colleagues, he told me we found out that his government, the photo of his government database is actually the photo he has, but he's actually a 30+ guy. So how can photo verification work in this way? It is really out of control failure thing, but that is a fact. So I don't know whether anyone here is familiar with having applied for the transit. Okay, when you apply for Wuhan is a whole different permit for Hong Kong people to go to China. They actually they have a long list of requests how you take the photo. Or take off the glasses, you actually have a red frame, you have to put your hair here.
As long as you use the photo proof that is
Actually, at the very beginning, I thought this is the reason for them to charge us money. But actually, this is not. Because when I renew I don't know what idea I apply in China. They do it this is for free, but they still in trying to do it. Because they have a standard of capturing your photo for ID verification. When you enter China, mainland China, even to the custom or whatever, they do have facial recognition. And that is why you need to make sure the photo in the database is mostly updated. And they have the standard that facilitate and do facial recognition. It is the Japanese infrastructure. The South Africa doesn't have. That's why the conversion metric is very bad. We face a lot of challenges like that. When you look at it, one, actually how to match the person between two platforms. My user ID, like this is Josie 10 in our platform. My user ID is J123. Their user ID is A123. We're not talking about the same person. We cannot share email address to them. They cannot take care of it because personal email is actually a PII. So we figure out, we discovered we have to invent a number called case ID just to refer to the same case. And then the second part is actually a challenge is we have a rule is we don't want one person to have multiple accounts. So I mean you can only verify an account once. But then we don't know the ID, they don't know our email. How can they know that actually it's the same person? So we need them to set up something we call a hash ID. So that means the encrypt ID. So every time after the person is being verified, they send us an encrypt ID. So in case the person verified in the second account the second time, they will be the same encrypt ID. And then we figure out, oh, it's the same person, but still we don't know who that person is because we don't have the ID. The second one is how to improve the conversion within the program. Just like the thing we say, oh, the government photo, that they don't have photo. We also have other issues that can be solved. How can we persuade them? Can we actually get them to have a tracking and they have most likely tell us channels? Third one, how can we ensure the accuracy of the partner, which is actually the question that many asked as well. So I was giving. Fourth one, what should be the metrics? What the passing rate means. So you define a metric, you go on read through and you say, oh, we just want people to complete it. So as long as they complete the process, it's good. You know, we have to make sure that they become verified. Because thinking about that, every time we actually get process or send a person to get verified as a party, they will charge us per verification. We don't want to send people to get verified and then try to fail because the fail verification or fail really doesn't mean anything to us. It doesn't bring value to us. If it brings value to us, as long as the seller is being verified and a large amount of sellers being verified, we can tell our platform is a trustworthy platform. And then what happened if facial recognition fails? Just like what I say, 30% of failure people is actually they don't have photo in the government database. What can we do? We cannot ask them to go to the government and then we need the ID. We need the ID so that the government can capture the photo again. We cannot do that. Right? No one is going to do that. Now we need to have phase 2 and phase 3. Phase 2 basically we call it knowledge phase. Knowledge phase means although we cannot allow them to do facial recognition, we ask them, we actually the partner will generate a list of questions that they retrieve from the government database randomly, and only you will only know only the person will know the answer. For example, which year you actually start your first mortgage, and then at which bank, when you get married, or which city you get married, and these are that's why I say basically this kind of company actually they can retrieve a lot of information that you can have, but then they just be controlled by the government, what they can get and how they can use, and then make sure that they cannot identify that person. That's why we call it knowledge-based question. And even though knowledge-based questions fail, what is the next step? For example, if someone asks you get a question like, I mean, you guys are young. Let's say if someone asks your granddad, which is 70 years old, it generates a question like, which bank you do your first mortgage? And then like, I don't know, I cannot remember. Or which year you do your first mortgage? I cannot remember. So these are people, they cannot really answer the question because all the questions generate randomly. Now we need to think about the first step, manual verification. And all these you need to think about is actually, okay, in which situation in which you have to lead the user to this for example, this scenario to handle the knowledge base. And then even though the knowledge base is failed, then how to handle it to the, let's say, the manual verification. All these you can consider as an enhancement. It is not a small project. And then you need to be design the entire workflow, go through the process that Brian mentioned about design. And after talking all this, it is just the infrastructure, we call it from the scratch, infrastructure of this process for ID verification. If you want to scale it up, we have to apply more business case. Otherwise, what is the value of actually building this platform or building this great project? The second part is, of course, scale up. We need to think about, okay, in what scenario we can reduce this ID verification and then make the platform more trustworthy. There are some cases, for example, just a very basic one, and very basic one, like if a crime is committed, for example, if a buyer report that he's being cheated by the seller, and then he did report to the police with a police case, then basically the company can request the verification partner to retrieve the ID information of that seller regarding that transaction, and then pass it to the police, and that is what we can do within a legal capability. The second part is, do you think learning is the part we can do with authentication? Think about the business scenario. This is C2C, right? Sometimes we come out to this transaction. Okay, let me selling an item to me. We talk in the chat. How can I, when I'm managing, how can I know that it's managed? We can do a handshake, do it again, and then verify that when before we do like a transaction, we verify the platform that is managed, the seller I talk with, then it's Josie, this is really a buyer, and then we proceed to payment or proceed to transaction. And then one of them is marketplace offline. This is for marketplace offline transaction. And so that is also one more thing that's quite interesting is when there's some feature or there's some product, they need to do things exclusively for a certain nation. That is one of the ways. I can share a project that I'm involved in. So you know the Russian and also the Ukraine war, right? In March, I joined actually a global task force to build a platform to help the Ukraine. And then at that time, we worried about, let's say, the spy from Russia who actually got into the platform. So one of the idea was to actually do ID authentication to make sure people who sign up for that platform, to use the service, is Ukrainian. But at the time, we didn't do it because it's very complicated. Just not more than complicated, it's just like what we say, we're not licensed to do that because it was just an NGO. And if we need to do that, we need to basically have to bypass the law. And that is the first thing I would think I have never experienced for them. When things happen and they want to build a feature that exclusive only to one certain or certain nation, and that is one of the approach to identify where you're from or which country you're from. Because all the IP addresses have can be here and can fit an IP, but that only this one can identify your way from. So that is the end of my talk. Thank you.
Okay, so let's have a panel discussion. Brian, Rio, Josie.
And you? How about you?
So maybe I will combine the panel discussion with your Q&A session. Okay, so any questions for our speakers?
係嘅，所以呢啲嘢咧有啲情況喺晒面。Yes. Okay, the question. So her question is about because with the knowledge-based question, so it should be under the data categories. Yeah, that is actually even for example, they have a database because we don't own that database. Only under that company. They still have to go all the rules and Java database. They cannot actually like read it. They just have to generate it from what they have there, and then present it to the customers. And then they can only like say combine it and to the rating, like the percentage of correctness. They don't want to actually try to verify the answer behind it. They try to figure out whether it matches what is actually from the data database, and then they try the accuracy rates. That is what they can do.
You're quite right. Those kind of factors, we do a lot of people.
Yes.
No person does not
Yeah.
But the knowledge-based question doesn't really deal with identity that situation because I already know everything about you. Right?
That is actually to deal with the easy call it is to worry about whether the one who answering that question is the person. Yeah.
Yeah, but so for example, right? You said, oh, when did you get married, or
Yeah.
birthday?
Yeah, they will not ask this kind of object, so it's very simple. You're very checking happened in your life that only they assume only you know it. Maybe your wife will know, but they assume only you know it. That's kind of question.
Yeah, it's always combined.
But even next they have to answer like the 5 to 6 or even up to 10. So they have to answer. They will not request the person to answer completely. 100% right. Because if you answer 100% right, they will try to claim whether you are the person. Yeah. Because actually they understand some people will forget about it. That's why their pathway will not be 100. For example, they will expect I said 6 out of 8 you will get the answer.
Yeah, actually, I was had a conversation with my bank. So the customer service actually tried to verify my identification. So they asked me questions like how many different types of bank accounts and what currency. I really forgot. I used to have but she haven't used them. I just a few dollars there. So I didn't answer it correctly. But after all, they still verified.
Manual verification is actually someone asks you the question based on a knowledge-based question. Oh, there are 2 ways. One is digital approach. The second approach is actually they still need to verify it. It's a combination of getting your ID information, getting your ID copy, and then they will ask you the manual verification. Ask you the knowledge-based question. It's a combine of both.
For the first time file, right? If they do not have the device yet, how should I define what would be the possible?
So if you were the GM,
This is my
diamond. I know the solution. It's a diamond.
So currently we're thinking like the dark. So ask them more personal detail based on like our stuff.
Long story short, because actually every solution has one of the parts. One of the things we need to do before we jump to a solution is to identify what's the pros and cons of each question, a solution, and then second is actually what's the cause of it. Thinking about knowledge-based or system generated, that means you have to build an system structure. Now, thinking about the implementation, of course you have to look at the passing rate. The second part is looking about the implementation cost, the complexity, and also thinking about the traffic between your and them. What is the next step? The manual application, the close is actually very good. But then close is actually every step that involves people is a higher cost in days as well. And also how to actually bring people from online to offline. Knowledge base will actually like know all the other applications something purely online. But then you need to bring someone offline. That means even you have to leave the contact and then someone actually refer and then have to call them without the information. First of all, what is the connection between online and offline? Especially in a very sensitive topic. We cannot ask the person to submit your ID so that the ID person actually knows which ID you are talking and know who you're talking. These are all the information flow that you need to think about before we jump to the solution. So that's why I think it's a standard to your level.
Any questions for Brian? Rio?
I do have another question for Josie, actually.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so there are countries like Estonia where it's digital citizenship is quite advanced. So do you fly across different countries? Maybe a lot easier to this kind of stuff. Maybe there's services that are already made available to the business community, because it really depends on which country they're available, right?
Yeah, actually, actually there's a different, like a global identification partner. They provide this and they basically connect you. They will tell you, if you go to those kind of companies, they will tell you, oh, these are the countries that we have access to. So we don't have, we just, to be honest, sometimes when you select a partner, there's a different concern, right? One is the cost, of course. The second part is actually depends on, for example, you have to work with South Africa. South Africa, people wanted to work with South African partners, so it's easy to manage instead of a global partner, because they may have more localized information. So this is more like a selection of partner depends on all different constraint or concern you need to think about instead of just we want to find a global partner. Because okay, it depends on how you design a solution. When we design a solution at that time, we think only for the South African market. That's why you select a so localized partner. But mostly, if you work for a global company, you develop things as a service because of login as a service, like say payment as a service, or authentication as a service. Then if you are let's say in most is in the headquarters, you only design the infrastructure and core elements. And then you basically want the local team to just plug in your service and take care of actually the localization part. Then it's easier to work with global partner. Because the core part, you cannot, let's say if I get service can connect to, and that partner can actually have access to the database of 200 countries. And that's what we want to do. But at that time, we only focus on the South African market. That's what we say, we tell our first actually selection partner was actually someone from South Africa, right? Someone from San Francisco. But now we didn't actually select them because they basically have, they have more difficulty to access information from South Africa than a local partner. This is also one of the concerns we actually need to figure out at that time.
I'm wondering, who is the target can be authorized to retrieve some of the information from the government database?
So crazy, right? You want to know the company name or you want to design?
Oh, just
How to become a company?
yeah, because this is some party who is the authorized to.
These are the party actually they. Okay, I don't tell the name of the company, but then in the past they actually work for the bank industry, finance industry. They build this type of solution for the finance industry. Remember at the very beginning I mentioned our customer actually come from the finance industry. Because the government did this kind of information for them, this is easier to get those kind of license. But then and to be honest, this actually we were Peter's company. Were the first client who actually worked with them on an e-commerce or marketplace. Because they previously worked for the agents, like when they build a solution, it's most likely for the people they become a client, actually the finance industry, they already get a license. But how they apply the license, they have no idea. Yeah. And I can tell there are a lot of companies. For example, I just signed an offer letter today. I need to sign an authentication. But yesterday, yeah, this morning I signed. And then I need to sign an application paper for the company, outsourcing partner, to do a background check on me. And I remember one of the times to check whether I'm in any sanction list. And I also wonder how they can check it. I don't want to be that kind of company, so but this kind of company does exist.
We do KYC also. Like basically we buy from Multi. We check whether you are sanctioned by US government. But this, yeah, I mean like it's a black box. So basically the outsources part of work to our partner, and we rely on their feedback. So they say this guy is sanctioned, then we don't sell them insurance.
So I have a question for Brian. So basically, you work in an environment where you have to try to work around legal restrictions and all that kind of constraints. Did you encounter a situation that you couldn't actually get around the law and some of the products that you want to have to change or to either give up a product or to make a major switch to something else?
I think the answer I would say is definitely yes. I would say back off. There are a lot of it's a great gap for a lot of different ideas that we want to develop. For example, we want to engage different partners who sell insurance. For example, we want to find e-commerce companies sell insurance, but because of the license requirement for and in Hong Kong, you need to sell insurance policy with the license. Either you are an insurance company, or you are a broker, or you are an agent. So we kind of get around it, and even though we will try to partner with different companies that may have this kind of arrangement or license, but these are still for physical instance or like the traditional like for AIA or so for us, we want to do it similar way, like if you want to sell to an agent or sell to a broker, we need to get the license. So somehow we are developing this some kind of collaboration with other companies, but yeah, I mean I think 2 years ago since I joined, there are really 3 or 4 failures that we try to pitch to insurance authorities and say, hey, we want to partner with this company, but yeah, it doesn't work out. So it happens a lot, and I think the learnings that we get is we try to do it fast. Yeah, we try not to invest in development resources the idea first. We try to do a prototype and sell to partners, sell to IA and say, hey, this is what we want to do, and will you approve it? If they say no, then we will switch out. So yeah, I mean in a regulated environment, it's quite impossible to get everything. So I think just get ready to get this approved and
I think insurance is one of the most regulated industry. From my experience doing it, insurance tech, basically you just have to find the path of least resistance. So basically you do you try to find many paths to get through. Basically at the end of the day you want to make money, right? You want to sell something. You want to provide a product to someone. So you know where you want to go, but there are all these hurdles for you. Some hurdles you just have to bite the bullet. And for example, you have to get the license. So for example, if they require that you have to have a broker license, then you just have to find someone who has a broker license partner with them. Or there are certain things that maybe you can acquire yourself. So maybe one of the C-suite people will go and maybe he has a license, or maybe there's one exam from the license. You just go and get it. Just pick the test. Get it 3 months. So it's the kind of least resistance and just be flexible. It's like what Bruce Lee said, right? Be like water. When you are doing stuff in a PM, time is a killer. You don't get something out, you are dead. I mean, every single week you're paying salary. Unless your father's decaché, right? It's gonna end. So you just have to be fast, be quite nimble.
I think there's an example that we want to share. If we look into Google, Google Bowtie and PHP and Samsung company, telecom company, we were selling a harness product there, which promotes telepathy. But before actually this product is entry, that we don't get the lesson, so we switch it to our health energy, and that's how we absorb our adapt to the restrictions and try to keep launching and get business and get. Yeah, we're still we're selling telemedicine membership to their clients. Get your foot in the door. I mean, whatever you want to do, maybe you have a vision or timeline of 2-3 years, but you get something in because the laws will change. Because when I was in Singapore, I mean, I couldn't do a lot of things. And then 2-3 years after I, kind of learned something, and then all of a sudden, the regulator decided to have a sandbox, and now everybody do the issue of that. So, it's sometimes it's the draw of luck, right? But the thing is that you're in there, you're collecting data, your team is learning, and then you're actually gaining experience. Your PM is kind of learning about the law, and then everyone how to work together as a team. So in 2-3 years, all of a sudden you guys are fast. When opportunity comes, then you can go and really grab it. So it doesn't matter just getting it out there and seeing them.
Can you share one or two more examples about when you do the product innovation, so you need to go through the compliance or regulation, right? Then you need to check. So can you give one or two more examples of the successful case, or things that you think is very interesting?
Okay. I think one recent example is we tried to launch our KYC process today. Okay. Let me put it this way. Before we have a requirement we need to look at our insured customers. The name must be equal to the credit card holder. And we have this requirement because we need to satisfy one of the requirements under the guideline we need to kind of verify that customer is that person. Because of the risk of getting business from some people hopefully don't know. And that is quite a big challenge. We see a lot of data where people are trying to buy for relatives, trying to buy for their daughters and sons, but they can't really get them because of business. So earlier this year, we tried to launch our own based on the requirement. Actually, besides this restriction, we can also satisfy this restriction by doing our KYC, taking selfies and taking photo of it right now. So we built this solution in-house, and we shipped this selfie feature early this year. And after that, we took away the restriction on having the same credit card holder name as the insured person. So that we kind of satisfied another restriction by innovation, so that we kind of remove another hurdle, which blocks some of our conversions. So that's one thing that we worked on earlier this year. Yeah. And there are also other interesting stories on group management. For example, what we are trying to do now is we try to push the B2B medical market. We try to sell it online, and there are a lot of discussions between different partners, and we were trying to get it around by having some middle ground solution. For example,
we are not doing it 100% online. We still need some kind of human engagement before the policies come through. So we try to do things that do not scale first and see how the regulators receive. So when we get the feedbacks and get business, we show to the regulators, hey, that's how we're doing now. Why not consider relaxing some of the restrictions? So that's another tactics that we try to do.
Did you get warned by any regulators?
Yeah, we got complaints from regulators. So whenever we got complaints, I need to write small reports. Yeah, that's a nice. Yes.
What are the barriers that you're facing with regard to telemedicine insurance companies? I understand that Toll Tide has some regulation, some local health medical organization. They try to do telemedicine, but it's very difficult because things. So what are your experiences or what are the forms or solutions that you find to navigate through?
I think for telemedicine, the hurdle is not on compliance or no, because we actually have our telemedicine product and I think the problem is the biggest hurdle is service level, because we partner with our telemedicine company and we try to deliver the solutions through integration with them. So clients and our with our insurance policy, they can click into the our portal and get into the telemedicine company's website, and they can start the telemedicine service. So we launched it last year, and everything was fine. But when we hit the COVID peak in February, the demand suddenly surged like 4 times or 5 times normal demand. So basically, the telemedicine partner cannot sustain or cannot really fulfill the requirement that are promised by the service level because of this sudden surge. So I would say because telemedicine services, it's still like a services like physical services that cannot scale geometrically. It's still like you need to get one doctor first, and you need to get medicine delivered to the clients, and that's the basic requirement for telemedicine, and it's difficult to scale that up. And we face problems on that side. So by that time, when we hit the surging demand, we luckily we have our own clinic, and we invite our own doctors to be one of the telemedicine providers also to satisfy the demand gap. So yeah, we got lucky, and we also got other partners and traditional industries that can also support. So we try to pull in different resources to satisfy the need better and times like the COVID peak was hit. But yeah, I mean, like in general, I would say it's not the problem on regulation, but more on operation.
Yeah, other questions for Josie or other.
I know, because I was reading the news like maybe like a year ago about like in mainland China there was a news about granny who made a triple kill in a game of honor of things, and in the middle of the night, and she passed her face recognition 16 times, and then Tencent said, oh, Tencent said it's really that granny. I'm just wondering, like, in your opinion, like, is there anything that the Tencent or other company can do things better to just make the system more efficient or effective?
That's a good question. Just want to make sure everyone knows what I'm talking about. The story is actually last year, China government introduced some rules and regulations on PDJs, and targeting on how many hours they play per week, and also targeting the age group. And then one report, a case is actually like 1,000 registered users in elderly. away many times, like even in the middle, right? It's kind of like beyond the time they expected. And then do many times, more than 10 times checking. And this is really the elderly who do the IP verification. Basically, it's not breaking the rules, but then it's like the game is like, because whenever they play the game, you need to do a crazy calculation to override. So it happened in the middle of the night, with normally long hours, and then the hour passes something non-reasonable. And then Cantonese for that, they have done many checking, and it's still that person, the elderly. So I think this question is, and here I can argue with not having played the games. I mean, people who don't play the games. So the turnout, the that's what they say actually is, they urge the elderly senior persons not to overprotect their grandkids. That is not really that the government turnout like the turnout advice. Because if you are asking a question, the first point is actually, this is talking about like first, do we need to like I mean I don't have an answer, but the question is, do we need to apply this kind of authentication in this purpose? Second, do we really need to check more than 10 times to try to prove something? Because on my project, on my business project, the situation is to prevent people from being cheated and scammed. I mean, from being cheated and scammed. It's more like for the money saved. But those kind of things for to avoid like children to abuse the game, of abuse the game. Me, I'm not here in this regard. I'm saying as like an adult, the most effective way is to educate them rather than to control them. Just like a mother can control you not to go out at 11 p.m. and then you are trying to break the law. This is another thing. But if you go back to that situation, I would say it's very difficult because you cannot control the, okay, even you go through a lot of actually authentication, you cannot stop the process from like I pass my computer or my phone for anyone to play the game. If you really want to do it by system, you can think about when you play the game, does it really have to turn on the camera and then all the time it capture that person who played the game is the one who authenticate. In system, you can do that. But then we ask ourselves, is it worth doing that? And what is the value behind this? It is almost just like what Brian said, right? Sometimes if you say no to things, even the rule are not need you to do that because it may not be the correct approach, appropriate approach to adopt that thing. Solution or technical things right now, you can do it most of the stuff. It's just a matter of the course at a time. But sometimes we need to evaluate whether it's worth spending that course and time to achieve that value. That is the thing we need to think about as well. I don't know whether you answer your question.
Yeah, I just may ask that. Okay.
Yeah, I think that also raised some interesting question about like how do we balance the user experience versus the regulatory requirements that are where the latter is actually getting more crazier and crazier. Year by year, I mean, more countries are going more regulations and more control to their people. How do we build products that are ethical and that can still satisfy the customer needs?
Actually, I have a question about that. I don't know whether you like TikTok or YouTube in short video. I don't know whether you like YouTube short video or TikTok. One of the things that they do, I mean, TikTok why is so like attractive to youngsters in the West is actually their recommendation system. I mean, it's a combination of all of AI, all machine learning, and also how to capture the information. Like with all of that auto automation, this kind of things, basically it favors the polarization ranking path. In that YouTube, basically they keep on pushing your content that you really want to be. But then it also actually exclude you from the opposite side. And then I mean, if you need to be always an ethical question, whether it is helping us or actually making the world worse.
Well, I don't have a really good answer to this question. I think that's
it's definitely a challenge because, for example, like whenever we are selling new product, we need to lay out a lot of documents. We got TNC, we got business culture, we got what else? Core product features that need to be solved quite well. So basically, if you look at other virtual insurance, like Google or Apple, we're doing excellent. And I think the key point is we try not to deceive our customers. We try not to hide something that can help them. For example, we learned a lesson early this year. Some KOLs and Facebook try to attack us by saying like, Multi doesn't care about people who migrate to other countries. So they kind of pinpoint our TNC and say we don't cover people who migrate to the UK or US. And we have the loss there definitely hidden in the PDF or in the document. And we try to improve it by making it more apparent, but apparently no one gives attention to the explanation we had and how it evolves on basis. So at the end we remove that loss, we give the protection or coverage to people who migrate to other places without adding HR. Because we definitely agree that that's something that's quite redundant and our users are more moving to other places. Apparently, like all got friends who are migrating to other places, and they are our users, and we try to keep them. So I think like even if you write all the TNs there and try to protect, so like things you try to find them. So I guess like at the end you need to know what are your customers are. So when we look back, like personally, I think we are not reacting fast enough. When we notice this, migration trend, we had the idea of removing that cost earlier, but we kind of hit it in the back office. We think like, hey, people will not notice it. I think we got other but somehow it's by us because someone may point on that issue and make it loud and make it viral and it hurts branding. So yeah, I think it shows one thing. Start with you.
I have a question for you, like I think I'm past my mouth, which is like, do you guys do your company track and verify rather is an every insurance company to do that? Because by my understanding is you have to be a company of the resident in order to protect that insurance contract. So if people keep doing, then they should buy a new one. That's called multi or global citizen. And then quite an expensive insurance for my understanding.
No, not all companies are doing that.
So you guys are doing it for the sake of the numbers, like
I would say like
and there's no risk.
I mean like we balance when we do the calculation. Of course, we're not doing it because someone attacked us, and we definitely want to remove that earlier because we think that that's what our users want, and we definitely see CS tickets asking for this particular issue. Then we notice it, but we react to it, and that's why we love it.
You should put it on the top of your page. I mean, I used to do it, but actually it will trigger me as well. Like I think I'm kind of like for UK, and stuff. And I now just start worrying about my own insurance. Cover me when I'm sitting in foreign country. That's why I'm but your policy you should actually it's great. It's a great sort of point that it was kind of like I mean every day something is like for the great, but you should really put it on your like market on it. I don't see any major company talking about it yet.
Well, actually, if you look into the TNC of a lot of companies, they say we cover, but blah 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 subject.
The first thing is always ask where is your country of residence. That's what I always see. And if it's in this sense, then they should purchase a travel insurance. This is because I can imagine like when it's come to a Japan, then they would try to whether you are in Hong Kong, you're sick in Hong Kong, you get hurt in Hong Kong, you get hurt in the UK, you get hurt in the way to UK, that is the airplane. That happens, and they will wear. That's what insurance is. This is finance.
Or you can still claim fee tax.
Yeah, but then you guys would push away the risk, I guess, like that at that point. You would say, okay, it's Cathay Pacific should pay, then he's on pay. Wow. And then or maybe he's in the immigration airport, then the airport has to pay, and no insurance company pay for it. So I think this is a big decision, right? Because what I learned from all the mindset is like you will never sacrifice that. So I know that I was arguing with my sister another day, customer centric. It's really hard to do. It's easy to say, but hard to work.
So it's a matter, right? It's a matter of your power, right? Because
but it's really hard in operational level. When you work on that, if you always listen to the customer and then provide what they need, then there won't be argument.
One point we can't really put it out now because we are still an intern company in Hong Kong and we can't really say anything. We're covering people in the UK and we can't accept people who are in the UK at the moment to apply. So that's the distribution.
But you are ads, and how can you define whether they're really in Hong Kong or UK?
Well, we track orange.
They use the VPN as well.
Well, yeah, that's one part. Technically, of course, we can't really block every application, but we try to do whatever we can. For example, we try to block applications from other places, and if they declare they're not in Hong Kong, then we are not going to accept their. So it's only a cost or benefit for our existing customers who were in Hong Kong or that moved to other places to work or whatsoever. But it's a lose-lose situation, right? Like, I think technically, if you are from UK, somehow you were able to buy a policy from Hong Kong. I mean, the insurance company can say, look, we're not going to pay because, you lied, right? And then we're just going to refund your little premium, right? So that's what okay. So the guy who actually wasn't expected claim lose. But then the insurance company also lose because then the guy could make a big stink out of it and damage the insurance company's brand. So in some sense, I mean, both sides lose. Unfortunately, this is regulation, right? But sometimes there's a legitimate reason why a product cannot be sold overseas. So for health insurance, if a person actually lives overseas, they're exposed to completely different risks. So in a way, the pricing will be different than something here. And also, the regulators will not be able to enforce certain things. So, I mean, again, insurance is one of those like extremely heavily regulated things. So, if people try to kind of get around these kind of things, I mean, both sides are going to get hurt. So, in a way, an insurance company have to make sure that, they prevent that kind of scenario from happening. I mean, that's kind of like the best scenario.
Okay, I think we're almost
We're supposed to leave by now.
So just some last few words. We're still constantly looking for topics, speakers, venues, and volunteers. So if you like events like this, I hope you have enjoyed the sessions today. Do come to us or just raise up your hand if you want to be a volunteer. Help us connect with other product practitioners. Doesn't necessarily be product managers. It can be any product related roles as well. I think we did have speakers like UX,
we have developers, we have what's that?
Psychologists, designers.
And that's an XAA, everything is a platform service.
Yeah. So anything that can help us better in our everyday product life, to invite them to share. I think I hope you have also learned a bit more tonight. And do follow us on all these social media. feel free to chit chat and connect with all the other members and just don't post a lot of job ads. That's fine. Otherwise, yeah, just chat about anything that you've learned. You can share any articles you like on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or Telegram. Telegram is also great. So yeah, thanks for joining tonight.
I don't know what else, and thank you for you guys joining and coming today. I don't know if I have explained or introduced myself. By the way, I'm also the host of tonight's. So I was just kind of look back and look at my message. I met Rio about like 4-5 years ago, and he was our member as well. Sorry, 3-4 years ago, not that long. Okay, we are still young. And then I think Brian, I think I met him about 2019. Then now he shared. Then we met Josie last December. So they're not like a product expert or something. Right? As I know that when they were green and when we were green as well, the community. So anything you want to share, it could be a good topic. You think that it's tiny, but then it's a kind of like a learning or case study that you can share. So you can connect with those guys on their LinkedIn, on Facebook, but then join our conversation and then raise some voice and then build up the community, because it's a rare chance that we can have a meetup today. Thank you for Brian. Thank you for the Go Cafe. And thank you for in order to grow the community, keep everything going, then we need to share and proactively and engage. So thank you. I hope to hear you guys very, very soon. So feel free to ping me or ping Amanda on the meetup.
Yeah. So I think Brian has to close
No,
out
I
this
think we can spend 15 minutes working.
Okay. That's very kind of you.
Yeah.
That's the spirit of 有人幫冇人 sell 啦。Okay, so yeah, feel free to.
I think it's too late. Otherwise, I would ask for office tour.